G'day everybody, Daniel here from GI Energy. Today I want to talk to you about commercial solar. So in this video we're going to cover the reasons why people are installing solar panels and batteries for their businesses, some of the benefits, what to look out for, what subsidies are available, and then a little bit of advice around general energy management and making sure that if you do install solar and or batteries for your business that you do it correctly and that you future-proof those systems. So first of all, the key reason, the key motivator behind why people are installing solar and batteries for their businesses is rising energy costs. So that's the biggest pain point we hear from customers, is that their energy costs have continued to increase over the years. When you look at a graph of energy costs, it kind of goes up and down like this for businesses, but in that upward trajectory, meaning that each year they typically go up somewhere between sort of 2 or 3% right the way up to 25%. If you're on a C&I contract, meaning that you have to enter into a contract and you're on a large scale tariff, you have to enter into a contract, and if you'd have done that 3 or 4 years ago, the energy costs would have been a lot lower than they are today. So now you're renewing your contract and there's quite a lot of pain there because the rates in that long period of time have increased such a lot. Now you have to lock in today's prices, which are pretty high, and so on. So that's always been the key driver, is energy costs and trying to reduce the overheads to the business. Secondly, carbon management and their push towards being carbon neutral is obviously a key driver, as there's more pressure now to be carbon neutral and sustainable as a business. So that's the second key driver that we hear from our customers, is that they're trying to reduce their carbon overheads. In addition to that, it's energy independence. So that means not having to be completely relied upon in terms of relying on grid power, not having to rely on all of your energy coming from the grid. So if you're introducing more and more electrical appliances to your business, there may come a time where the grid just cannot supply that level of energy and you need some subsidized energy from your own plant. So they're the core drivers, and I'll go into a little bit more as we go through this video on each of those. But essentially that's why most people are inquiring and installing solar panels. The big reason why solar panels are more popular for businesses here in Australia compared to most other countries in the world is the large subsidies that are available, which will help you pay for solar upfront and over time. The key ones there are STCs and LGCs. That's available on a federal level across the country, and then within each state there's different subsidies as well. So the STCs are small scale technology certificates. The way they work is with solar panels, anything from 0 up to 100 kilowatts of solar panels installed on your roof, you will get STCs, which essentially are a tradable commodity, meaning that each one has a value. The bigger the system, the more STCs, the higher the rebate. That will typically pay for somewhere in the region of 30% of your overall installation, including supply and install of a solar system. Batteries now also have STCs. So similar sort of value, around 30% of the cost of a battery will now also be covered, but the cap on the subsidy for batteries is 50 kilowatt hours. You can install 100 kilowatt hours similar to the solar PV STCs, but you'll only get subsidies up to the first 50 kilowatt hours. That being said, it's still pretty valuable and it still reduces your ROI significantly. If you're doing bigger systems, so if you're going over 100 kilowatts of solar panels, you can't continue to claim STCs indefinitely. That is the cutoff, but the LGCs, which is large generation certificates, then kick in. The way the large generation certificates work is you install your solar system. There isn't any upfront savings, but what you'll do is measure your solar generation through an approved meter, and then you'll submit those readings through to the Clean Energy Regulator, usually through an aggregator, and you'll then get paid basically on the generation of the solar panels. So the more energy you produce, obviously with bigger systems, the more you'll get paid. You can choose to when that frequency of payment occurs, but usually it's a quarterly thing, and it's done pretty much autonomously, and you just get credits basically as the life of the system goes on, which helps reduce the ROI. It's important to note that all of these, STCs for solar panels, STCs for batteries, and LGCs, are diminishing in value as each year goes by. The STCs will go down in value on the 31st of December each calendar year. So if you install on the 31st of December, you'll get more than on the 1st of January the next year. LGCs are a little bit different. The LGCs are dependent on how many new generators are online. So if there's lots of big solar commissioned and put online in a year, then the STCs will go down in value quicker. If there's less, then that decrease will be slowed, but ultimately they are continuing to decrease as more and more solar goes online and more LGCs are obviously being purchased due to that additional generation in the system. Couple all that stuff together, there's also, as I say, in some states, there's different subsidies, but mainly for batteries. I won't go into all of them now because this video will be an hour long. We do have a battery guide that you can download and I can put a link in for, which explains exactly what each state does there. But when you look at the overall landscape and you look at the subsidies that are available with all of those things, then you take into consideration the climate that we have here in Australia, it creates a bit of a perfect storm for basically a wonderful solar return on investment. So the return on investment will differ from one building to another, from one load profile to another. For example, if you're a motel, your energy profile might dip during the day when everybody's out and about, and then peak again in the evening during when people come home, and again in the morning when people are getting ready to go out. So solar energy is obviously going to produce most of its power when people are out. Compare that to, let's say, a retail store that opens at, say, 9 in the morning and closes at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's kind of pushed into the solar hour production window. So those two businesses are obviously going to utilize their solar power very differently. A motel might benefit more from a battery, whereas a retail business might not need a battery or might need a smaller battery because most of their energy is in that solar window. Aside from that, the tariffs that you're on will have a huge impact on your return on investment. If you're on a C&I contract, meaning that you've got a rate per kilowatt hour, plus a lot of other charges for demand and network fees, usually your return on investment is a little bit longer than if you're on a small business tariff with all of your energy charges concentrated into a kilowatt hour charge. So the return on investment, depending on all of those things, as well as obviously install costs, can vary. Can vary anything from, I've seen as low as 1.8 years. So under 2 years, we've delivered return on investment for some people. It can be 10 years. So the ones that are under 2 years, they're pretty rare, and that's usually when we're doing other things, not just solar and battery. It's usually then when we're moving tariffs around and getting a bit more constructive and inventive with energy management. The 10-year ones is where it's really hard to get a good solar utilization, so there's lots of spilled energy potentially, or wasted energy you could call it, and then you're on a really tricky tariff as well. Even the 10-year ones though, to be honest, when you do a longer model and you look at the long-term benefit, a 10-year is a pretty pessimistic view, but you could be anywhere in between there. So you need to start looking at your load profile and then speaking to a company to design something to give you a more realistic return on investment for your specific situation. The other way that you can do it, if cash is not something that you want to spend on commercial solar, we do something called a PPA, which is a power purchase agreement. That works with GI Energy will come and install a full solar system for your business. Usually this is only for slightly larger systems, above 100 kilowatts upwards. There's no capital expense required, so the panels go on your roof. As soon as it starts generating energy, the energy will go into your business and you'll be charged for that energy under the PPA agreement. It can be over 10, 15, 20, 30 years, depending on how you want to set it up. During the PPA term, all you do is buy energy from your solar panels. If they don't work, you don't buy the energy. If there's a maintenance issue, it's covered by the PPA. If there's a warranty issue, it's looked after by the PPA. So all you're doing is basically buying power from your solar panels that are on your roof at a lower rate than you're paying for grid power. The other advantage of the PPA is you're locking in that rate. With the PPA, you know what it is. The energy that you're buying from the grid obviously can be quite volatile. So that's proven pretty popular for larger systems, for customers that don't want to spend capital on the investment. So now, the other reason people are buying more and more solar now is we've got to a point with solar panels especially, not so much batteries, but with solar panels and inverters, where a lot of the early research and development costs have been paid for. So solar panel cost, if you look at them probably from around 2011, started to decrease and then took a real big dip as the R&D paid itself off, factories became more established, and basically now we're at a point where solar panels aren't really getting any cheaper anymore. the technology is advancing and you're getting it for a really low rate. I remember back in 2008, we were installing 160 watt sharp panels for $3.68 a watt. That was our buy price. Now fast forward to today and you can buy panels for less than 30 cents a watt, which is pretty amazing, really. I never thought we'd get to that price point. We don't think they're going to get much cheaper than that because there's a cost of material there, obviously, that won't go down much, if anything. But now is a great time to buy because the cost of installing is pretty low. The subsidies are still quite high. Obviously, they come down over time. And then external factors like the US dollar can make our prices fluctuate a little bit for the hardware costs. So it's a great time to buy where tech is really, really advanced and the R&D is paid for itself somewhat. So the cost to install is lower than ever. Just want to talk a little bit about overall energy management. So the other thing that if you're using a lot of energy as a business that you might want to consider is a solar and battery, where you can basically dynamically trade energy with the grid. What I mean by that in simple terms is you can install a battery and enter into wholesale market arbitrage and FCAS, where you can actually sell your energy back to the grid at a really high rate and then draw it from the grid to charge your battery or use in your premises at a really low rate. That can all be done with hardware and software autonomously, so there's no manual input necessarily required, but it means that when the wholesale rate of energy is really low, that's when you draw from the grid. When the wholesale rate of energy is really high, that's when you push your battery back into the grid. This can actually be done for homes or businesses. Obviously you're playing with higher stakes as a commercial solar system, but it's a really good way of reducing your ROI for larger solar systems. While we're talking about that, we might as well talk about the energy management from a perspective of potentially not having enough grid power in the future. So the easiest example of this is if you're now starting to have staff or customers turn up in electric vehicles and you need to put charging stations in. A DC fast charger uses a lot of energy and it uses it quite quickly. And if you're doing that as well as adding more air cons or other appliances or other machines or whatever it is to your business, you might find that whoever your network owner is can't upgrade you anymore and they've maxed out your supply. What we can do there is install energy management hardware and software that prioritizes loads, makes sure that you've got enough solar and battery to cover the shortfall and saves you really expensive upgrades from the grid. So an example of that could be if you had EV charging stations for staff, you had panels on your roof and batteries, you also had a facility to run and it was the middle of summer and you didn't want staff not to have aircon, but the grid power just wasn't enough. So you install energy management hardware and software that prioritizes the load of the aircon over the electric vehicles. So staff can have their cars plugged in, but it might be that the first priority of the available combined load from the solar, battery and grid is to make sure that everything in your office and everything in whatever else you need in your facility runs. And then if there is enough power, then it goes through to the electric vehicles. You could also prioritize one charger. Let's say the owner of the business or somebody else really wanted to make sure that they were prioritized for any reason, you prioritize that load. So it goes there first and then it goes to priority 2, 3, 4, or however you want to set it up. Once again, that can save you a lot of money with expensive upgrades. And as we move into the future of electric vehicles and other really high power consuming appliances, that's going to become more and more important. So that will obviously help your overall ROI as well if you're looking at that overall energy management and now you've reduced your cost of having to upgrade grid infrastructure. So that's another reason why people are looking at commercial solar and another big benefit. We talked about the ROI a little bit. If you compare that to other countries, I don't believe that there's many that have as generous subsidies with such good climate. So we are really in a unique position here in Australia, which is why now, if you look at the residential market, in some areas, 1 in 3 homes have solar panels on the roof. And now with battery subsidies available, a lot of those homes will end up with batteries. For commercial businesses, as you fly into your destination, next time you do something like that, have a look out the window and look at how many businesses already have solar panels. We are really fortunate, and that's why there's been such a high uptake. The downside is that solar energy as an industry has quite a low barrier to entry, meaning it's pretty easy for somebody to start up a solar company and start installing commercial solar. The issue with that is it's not that easy to do properly. So installing solar panels on a home is a fairly straightforward process now. Installing a large commercial system with batteries and some of the other stuff we're talking about is actually pretty complex from an engineering perspective, and it requires a lot of experience and expertise. There's so many solar companies in Australia now, and a lot of them unfortunately are not doing a great job with commercial solar. So my advice would be, you're in a country where your return on investment is fantastic. Spend the money to do it properly, do it once, and do it with somebody that you can really trust. Do your due diligence, look at ABNs and see how long people have been trading, ask for insurances, ask for references, make sure you're really, really comfortable with whoever it is that you're speaking to, and make sure that they're designing the system properly for you. If they're not asking for a load profile and they're not doing a lot of work into determining exactly how you're using energy before they deliver a solution in terms of a proposal, they're probably not doing the right homework. I've seen quotes for megawatt solar systems handwritten on a handwritten quote with no due diligence done. That's fine if you want to take a punt, but realistically, you really need it to be engineered correctly, and you'll soon find out by doing your due diligence if the people that you're dealing with are capable of doing that. So take the time to find somebody that can do it properly, do it once, do it right, and make sure that it pays for itself really quickly. If you'd like to speak to anybody about doing something for your own business, obviously get in touch with us. We can do that free of charge for you. If not, hopefully you've enjoyed this video and got some value from it, and we may speak to you in the future. Thank you.